last year. Brett, I think we're going to start off with the Mavericks. What did you think of their title run last year, and what did you think of their decision to sort of get rid of Derrick Jones Jr., evolve the team, bring in Klay Thompson? What are the vibes like in Dallas for you right now?
I mean, it's a very exciting time, I think, in Dallas to be a Mavs fan. Like, the thing that really sticks out to me is just how much this team has changed around Luka in a very short amount of time. Like, when you even going back to, getting Kyrie and then the trades last season, obviously drafting Lively, but then, bringing in Gafford and Washington at the trade deadline and the effect that had. And now, post finals run, you've got Klay Thompson coming in. You've got some other nice pieces, Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes. They got Dinwiddie back. So, like, if you just look at the roster now compared to what it was, like, say, pre-Kyrie, it's like night and day, and in a good way for the Mavs. They've improved tremendously in terms of Luka's supporting cast. So, like, it's almost like, to me, it almost feels like what happened with Jokic in Denver, where, like, you have this superstar, this elite, this top top three guy. I think he and Luka are both in that category. And, like, it just took a little bit of time to put the right guys around him to get Aaron Gordon and to fill out that roster in a way that really makes sense around Jokic. Like, you knew you were going to kind of be in the mix just having him, but to get to that next level to where they won a title, you had to put those right pieces around him. And it kind of feels like that's what we're seeing with Dallas. Like, it's just been a process, but it's like we might be at the point now where, like, I mean, they made the finals last year, but now I think they're even better. So I think that's what we're seeing is just like they've built a serious team around Luka, and that's a pretty scary proposition for the rest of the league.
They've navigated this issue of their young sort of franchise cornerstone being too good too soon. Usually when you see teams build like this, they tend to get a little bit of lottery luck, and I suppose through having to trade up to get Luka in the first place, giving up that, I think, 2019 first round pick in that deal, and then Luka, by the time that the 2020 draft rolls round, he's carrying you to at least sort of a 500 record, even above. He's carrying you into the playoffs. So I think you hit upon that point, Brett, where I look at the team that made the Western Conference Finals the first time round, and the talent disparity is just off the charts. Like, you had Tim Hardaway Jr. starting for that team. You had Reggie Bullock as the starting small forward. You had Davis Bertans getting meaningful minutes in the playoffs. It's insane how they've been able to upgrade with, like, fairly limited resources. And a lot of that has come from really big gambles. Obviously, the Kyrie move, if you were a listener to the Bill Simmons podcast or Ryan Russillo, you'd have heard a lot of big names in the NBA space just saying, I would not touch Kyrie with a barge pole. I'm not going near that. But you look now and you say, I can get an all NBA caliber guard for a first round pick and 2 rotation players. Don't mind if I do. It's something that seemed to really pay off. And then obviously that decision to tank prior to the 2023 draft, where they got Kyrie and it just sort of looked like a half completed roster. And you think, you've got a star that's sort of in his early prime, and you're going to tell him that you don't even want to make the play in. It just worked out tremendously well with the addition of Derrick Lively. But I think I tend to agree with you when I say that I think that they've got a better roster than they had last year. I think the Klay addition is really significant. I've got them finishing around sort of the 3rd, 4th spot in the Western Conference this year. And I think that they'll probably be in a battle with another team that we're going to speak about a little bit later on. But some of the pushback I've had when I've spoken about the Mavericks in the past is no one knows who's going to guard who on the perimeter, especially if you're looking to guard Klay Thompson. Brett, are you worried about the defensive end, and how do you think they maybe navigate their personnel getting a little bit weaker on that end with the loss of Derrick Jones Jr. last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think Grimes can guard, Najee can guard. So, like, they did bring in a couple guys that can defend. Klay is certainly not what he used to be defensively. We all know that, but he is still, 6'7" and strong. Like, I don't think he's going to be a total cone defensively. And I think Kyrie's a little bit better than he gets credit for. Luka's big and smart. Like, he's got a little bit of that Jokic where, like, he's not. I mean, Jokic is a better defensive player than Luka. But again, I think he's a little better than he gets credit for, right? So it's not as big of a concern for me. It never really has been. Like, I remember when they first brought in Kyrie, like that was the big thing, was like, oh my, they're not going to be able to guard anybody. And I think they've kind of exceeded expectations in that regard. And then it helps when you have rim protectors like Gafford and Lively back there. So I'm not as worried about it. I think a healthy Quentin Grimes is going to be a really nice addition in particular. And I think Najee Marshall's a guy that maybe a lot of people outside of Pelicans fans aren't too familiar with. But he's just a very tough player that can kind of do it all, almost like an enforcer type of guy, that can, they call him the knife. Like, he can do a little bit of everything. So I think I like the additions there, and not too worried about the defense. Like, I think they'll actually be probably, in the top half of the league defensively, and and better than that offensively. So yeah, I'm feeling good. Like, it's interesting though, because like they weren't great overall last regular season. I think they were 14th in net rating. They didn't really take off until like the second half of the season, like mostly like after the trades.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting looking back, like where they were at, mid-season last year, and where we have them now. But I think they're going to be significantly better in the regular season than they were last year. Obviously, having all those guys, having them all go through training camp together. They won 50 games. I think they're going to be better than that. I would have them like second in the West right now. Like, they'd be, if I'm doing like West power rankings, like, look, a lot of that is that they were a finals team. Like, you can't take that away from them. And like you said, they did go to the West finals, just with Luka pretty much. So yeah, I'd have to have them second behind, probably only OKC. Not that they're that far ahead of, Denver or maybe some of these other teams in my mind, but that's like how I feel about them now in terms of the regular season and what they could potentially do in the playoffs. I think they're going to be really, really tough.
I don't think that's a crazy take. And I think if you ask me to look at it from a playoff perspective, I definitely lean that way, to where I'm thinking they really are another favourite to sort of go back to the finals again, because they're insanely deep as well. I think that, we've spoken about sort of the player quality, but I've got potentially 11 players that I'd be comfortable being in their rotation this year, with like a starting lineup of Luka, Kyrie, Klay, PJ Washington, and I think it's probably going to be Derrick Lively manning the starting centre spot, but that him and Gafford can play sort of 25 minutes per game. And then you've got Daniel Gafford, Najee Marshall, Quentin Grimes, Jaden Hardy, who looked good in stints last year for Dallas, Dante Exum, and Maxi Kleber as well. Maxi's been a pivotal player for them over the years. They've got a lot of depth. And I just want to come back to you saying that you think that they might be middle of the pack on the defensive end, because I agree with you. And I think that this serves as a really, really good opportunity to talk about something that maybe gets a little bit ignored. It's sort of these hidden factors that tend to sort of help your defensive rating, because of the sort of isolationist and heliocentric styles of Luka when he's running the first unit, and maybe Kyrie when he's running the second. Dallas are not going to be a team that turns the ball over a ton, so they're not going to worry about being in transition that much. If they keep putting the ball in the basket in half-court offense, they're going to be able to go back and they're going to be able to get set, kind of reminiscent to the Denver Nuggets, who play a ton in the half-court. And it's just, if you're not facing sort of breakaways from teams, your half-court defense doesn't have to be incredible, but if you're playing in it all the time, you're denying teams sort of that bread and butter offense. And the other thing is, not to be crude, but size just matters. If you're fielding Luka, if you're fielding Kyrie, PJ, and Klay. I say Kyrie because he's tended to hold up really well sort of in post situations up against bigger guys. He's got that savviness to just sort of know how to cope. They're one of these teams that can just funnel players towards the big man. I don't think that they're going to be sort of incredible from a containment perspective. And we definitely saw that against Boston in the finals. But the collective size, the fact that you can't look and say, we're going to bully that guy time after time after time, I think that they're going to be fine on the defensive end. And for me, it's about, I had written down here, sort of they integrated pace into their offense last year, where they were able to get out in transition. It wasn't just Luka walking the ball up the court every time. I wonder if there's an integration of movement this year with Klay, with Kyrie in the starting lineup. Grimes is a very capable shooter if he's feeling himself. I'm hoping that we can start to see a little bit of diversity with sort of like off-screen movement, off-ball movement, just to make Luka's life a little bit easier. Brett, do you think Luka would rather just sort of see a spread floor time after time, or do you think they're going to embrace Klay sort of in a mini Golden State style?
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, it's almost like you're wasting him if you're not using him in that capacity, because he's one of the best ever to do it. So I do think that was certainly part of the thinking, bringing him in is to integrate that type of stuff and sort of diversify the offense a little bit. And yeah, you made a great point too about part of the reason why their defense might be pretty good is just how good they are offensively and how that can carry over. And you're right, that's not talked about enough. And like, yeah, the containment stuff, it's like if you don't have a great rim protector, like we'll probably talk about New Orleans, like that's
Yeah.
that's where that stuff's really important, is kind of protecting the rim from the perimeter. But if you have a great rim protector or two of them, then it's not as big of a deal. So yeah, I think if they ended up with 12th in defensive rating, like what were they last year? They weren't even that bad at all, right? Like they were up in that range.
I think, like you said, I think that they sort of started off and they had a little bit of a torrid time. And then once they got Daniel Gafford in the building, they had sort of that February, March, April period where suddenly you're seeing sort of a +5 net rating when you're looking at the offense and the defense. And one guy that we maybe haven't mentioned here is year 2 of Derrick Lively. I think he was so impressive in that first year. And sometimes we see players hit a sort of like sophomore wall in their second season, but I think a combination of the service that he's going to get from Kyrie, the gravity of the on-ball players like Luka, Klay as well. He's going to be able to dime people up just as he was on the short roll in his first season. And he's also got that safety blanket of, if I am, on 3-4 fouls in the second quarter, I know that my team has Daniel Gafford. I can maintain, I can stay aggressive. What do you expect to see from Derrick Lively in his sophomore year?
Yeah, I fully expect to see just continued growth. I think a lot of people I've talked to and heard from in Dallas are expecting a pretty sizable leap from him, and I think rightfully so. He seems just like the type of kid that's really going to work hard, that really wants it, and his skill set is just such a perfect fit with this team, and especially next to Luka. I think he can really be optimized. So yeah, I would expect a pretty significant jump from him, as good as he was as a rookie. Maybe we'll see, more of that passing that was so valuable, and maybe we'll start to see the shot a little bit. Like I think that shooting potential is still there, which could be pretty interesting down the road, and just continue to rebound and protect the rim and just play with a lot of effort. So yeah, he's going to be a guy that's talked about a lot, I think, next season as just one of the really best young bigs in the league. I still can't believe Dallas got him. He's just the absolute perfect piece, the perfect building block to complement Luka. You love to see it.
Yeah, and I think it's the passing as well that really sort of differentiates him from other sort of rim running bigs. I just think the fact that he's going to be surrounded by so much shooting this year, he's going to have so much space to sort of run to the lane as well. I think that he could be set up for a pretty special second season. Just to finish off, they were 13th post All-Star break in defensive rating last year, but they were 5th in the playoffs. And when you consider the fact that they played Boston, they played OKC, I think they sported a 110 defensive rating in the playoffs last year, which means they can turn it up. Jason Kidd has sort of his fans and his detractors all around the league, but I think we've seen that over his sort of coaching, his tenure coaching in the NBA, he can be really creative from a scheme perspective, and he can get a lot out of teams on the defensive end. So yeah, I'm really excited to see Dallas this year. Finally, do you think this is finally the year where Luka gets MVP? If you've got them sort of secondish, that's what's held him back in the past, right?
He'd be my pick right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he'd be my pick. I think I never look at betting odds or anything like that. I'm not much of a gambler, but I would imagine he's got to be the favorite, right?
He's
coming off a finals run, and just with the numbers he's going to put up and with how good this team projects to be, like I think he's a pretty clear favorite in my mind. It wouldn't shock me if a couple of these other guys, ended up winning it. But like, I say yes. He's due.
You're right. Yeah, he is the favorite. I think it's him and Shea at the moment, just because we think that the OKC Thunder are about to have a sort of gargantuan season. But yeah, if he has the regular season record along with almost like a 32, 33 point triple double, he's going to be pretty undeniable.